By the time the metal bleachers started to buckle, the band was still playing. The sky over Ridgeview High's football field had turned the color of a bruise. Wind ripped at the flags. The scoreboard flickered, then flashed white. A crack of thunder hit so close it shook the stadium lights. Nobody moved. Not until the first support beam groaned. The sound cut through the cheerleaders' chant, through the roar of the homecoming crowd. People laughed nervously, thinking it was part of the fireworks show. Then one side of the bleachers dropped half an inch, just enough to make 300 pairs of feet stumble. Moms screamed. Kids started crying. A boy in a number 12 jersey pointed up, his face drained of color. "Everybody down," a voice shouted. No one listened. And then the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed the field. A second later, a transformer popped behind the end zone, showering sparks like angry fireworks. People surged toward the exits, pushing, shoving, tripping over coolers and lawn chairs. On the track, one man stayed low, while everyone else ran high. He moved toward the crush of bodies, instead of away from it, flashlight clenched between his teeth. Hands out, feeling for the ones who had already gone down. His fingers found a wrist with no pulse. His knee slid in blood on the rubber track. "Sir, can you hear me?" He barked into the noise, already tilting a man's head back, clearing his airway as rain finally opened up overhead. While the town panicked, the night custodian was the only one acting like he'd trained his whole life for this exact moment. "Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world." His name was Connor Hayes, and most days nobody noticed him at all. By 5:00 p.m., the teachers were packing up their laptops and heading out of Ridgeview High, grumbling about traffic and late emails. Connor was just clocking in, tugging on a faded navy work shirt with facilities stitched over his heart in white thread that had seen better years. He was 37, broad-shouldered. Dark hair kept short because it was easier that way. There was a stiffness in his left leg when the weather changed, the kind that made him take stairs a little slower than he used to. In the hallway cameras, he was just a shape pushing a cart rolling a yellow wet floor sign out of frame. In real life, he was a divorced dad living in a 2-bedroom rental 10 minutes from the school, sharing the place with his 8-year-old son Mason every other week. Mason thought his dad was some kind of superhero for knowing how to fix anything from leaky faucets to broken toy trucks. No one at Ridgeview knew that before mops and paint rollers, Connor had carried rucksacks and packed bleeding wounds under rotor wash. He'd been a medic with an Air Force rescue unit flying into places other people were trying to escape from. Mountains, flood zones, crash sites. He'd patched up strangers and lost a brother in arms on a mountainside he still saw in his sleep. He didn't talk about that. Not with the vice principal who called him maintenance like it was his first name. Not with the head coach who tossed him keys and said, "Clean up the locker room. Man, it smells like death in there." Not with the seniors who dropped fries on the floor and walked away because someone gets paid for that. What kept him going were simple things: Mason's crooked smile when he scored a goal in rec soccer, the quiet of an empty hallway after midnight, the feeling of leaving a classroom better than he found it, the promise he'd made at 26 years old, cradling his dying friend on that mountainside: "If I can't save you, I'm going to save everybody I can after you." On a warm Thursday in October, Connor was stripping old wax off the main lobby floor when the intercom crackled to life. The principal's voice came through, excited and breathless. "Reminder, everyone, Friday night is homecoming. We're expecting the biggest crowd Ridgeview's ever seen. Alumni, the mayor, news crews, the whole town. Let's show them our best." An hour later, his supervisor handed him a clipboard without even looking up from her phone. "Hayes, you're on stadium duty tomorrow night," she said. "Trash bathrooms, power checks, that kind of thing. We're short on volunteers, so you'll be out there start to finish. Connor wiped his hands on a rag, glanced at the weather bulletin on the office TV storm system, stalling over the county high winds, severe thunderstorm warning, and felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Large crowds, questionable wiring, old metal bleachers the district hadn't had money to replace. He signed the clipboard anyway. That assignment, that single line on a schedule no one else thought twice about, was the thing that put him under those bleachers the following night. When the sky opened up, the lights died, and 3,000 people learned the hard way that one invisible man might be the only thing standing between chaos and catastrophe. The day after the homecoming chaos, Ridgeview felt like a town trying hard to pretend nothing unusual had happened. The local paper ran a short piece about unexpected weather damage and praised the district for swift response, which was funny considering the only real response had been one custodian knee-deep in panicked families. But schools and small towns have a talent for moving on quickly, especially when the truth makes too many people uncomfortable. By Monday morning, Connor was back on the main campus pushing his cart down the hallway, while teachers stepped around him as if he were just another piece of equipment. The storm had peeled half the paint off the concession stand, scattered debris across the field, and blown out 2 bathroom windows. But no one asked Connor how he held things together when the bleachers shook. They didn't ask anything at all. At 7:45, right on cue, Vice Principal Langford came strutting down the hall with his tie askew and coffee stain that he didn't realize was spreading across his shirt pocket. He spotted Connor and swooped in like a hawk. "Hayes," he said, not bothering with a greeting. "I got 3 complaints about standing water near the west doors. Students are tracking mud everywhere. You need to get on that, like immediately." Connor nodded. "I'll take care of it." Langford squinted at him, annoyed he hadn't pushed back. "And I heard you were wandering under the bleachers during the game. That's not part of your assignment. We don't need liability issues." "I wasn't wandering," Connor said calmly. "I was making sure Langford cut him off. I don't need the whole speech. Just stay in your designated areas next time. We have protocols for a reason." He marched off before Connor could reply. Designated areas. Protocols. Funny words for a man who didn't see the look in that kid's eyes when the bench railing buckled a look of pure confusion and fear, the kind people wear right before they get crushed. But Connor swallowed it. It wasn't worth arguing with someone who'd never been within 10 miles of real danger. As he continued down the hall, he noticed a few students whispering near their lockers. A tall senior with slicked back hair nudged his friend, nodding toward Connor. "There he is," he muttered. "The bleacher rat." The friend snorted. Dude probably just wanted attention. Low-key pathetic. They didn't lower their voices enough. Connor kept walking, but something tightened in his jaw. He'd been called worse than pathetic, but somehow hearing it in the place where he tried to build something steady for his son, where he showed up every night like clockwork, landed differently. The worst part came later that afternoon. He'd used his lunch break to meet Mason outside the school for a quick hug. His ex-wife had a dentist appointment, so she'd asked Connor to pick him up early. The moment Mason saw him, he ran across the grass with his backpack bouncing behind him, smile wide enough to dissolve any bad day. But they didn't make it 10 feet before Coach Darren stopped them. "Whoa," Hayes' coach said, stepping between father and son. "You can't take kids off campus without checking in at the office." "Procedure." "I'm his dad," Connor replied, forcing himself to keep his tone level. "I'm just walking him to my truck so his mom can pick him up later." Coach's eyes flicked to Mason. "Buddy, you need to stick with your class until your teacher calls you. Can't just run off with, custodial staff." Something in Connor's spine went rigid. He looked down at Mason. The boy was already shrinking back, trying to figure out if he'd done something wrong. Kids could read adults like weather they knew when tension crackled in the air. "Mason's with me," Connor said quietly. "I signed him out." Coach shrugged, unimpressed. Then you need to go through the front entrance. You can't just walk around like you own the place. And then the one thing Connor hadn't expected, Sir Mason whispered, tugging Connor's sleeve. Am I in trouble? The way Coach Darren's eyes softened at the kid and hardened back at Connor told a story in one expression. In his mind, the child was innocent. The father was the problem. Connor took Mason by the shoulders. You're not in trouble, he murmured. Never. But Coach wasn't done. Listen, he said to Mason, not to Connor. Rules matter. Even if someone tells you it's okay if they're not a teacher or administrator, you check with us first. That's how we keep you safe, okay? Even my dad? Mason asked, small as a breath. Coach didn't hesitate. Even your dad? Mason's face, well, something cold and familiar slid into Connor's chest, a flavor of shame and frustration he hadn't tasted since the day he came home from the service and realized the country he spent a decade protecting didn't know what to do with men like him. Men who carried invisible scars, men who didn't have degrees or networks or the right clothes, men who cleaned bathrooms so their kids could have better. He thanked the coach because arguing in front of his son would only make things worse. He walked Mason through the proper door, signed the clipboard the receptionist shoved toward him, and steered his boy back out to the truck. But Mason was unusually quiet. You okay, Bud Connor? Asked once they were buckled in. Mason's feet swung above the floorboard. Why'd that man talk like you're not my dad? Connor closed his eyes for a second. Mason wasn't asking to be reassured. He was asking for the truth. Kids always want the truth even when parents dodge it to protect them. Some people don't understand my job, Connor said finally. They think it means something about who I am. But it doesn't. Doesn't it? Mason asked. No, Connor said firmly. What I do is work. Who I am is your dad. That part doesn't change. Mason nodded slowly, but the hurt lingered. That night, the mistreatment continued in ways small and sharp. The district sent an email about unauthorized custodial presence in restricted areas during athletic events. Langford forwarded it to Connor with a note. Please adhere strictly to your assigned zones to avoid legal concerns. When Connor arrived for his shift, 2 math teachers chatting near the break room went silent the moment they saw him, then whispered as soon as he passed. A student had drawn a comic on the whiteboard of a stick-figure custodian hiding under bleachers like a coward during the storm. Someone had scribbled, "Saving who?" with a laughing emoji. The only person who seemed excited to see him was the cafeteria cashier, Miss Dora, who occasionally left him extra chicken tenders wrapped in foil. But even she shook her head sympathetically when she saw the look in his eyes. You okay, honey? She asked. Just busy, he said. That storm shook a lot of people up, she replied. But sometimes folks forget it shook you too. He tried to smile, but it didn't come easy. Around 9 that night, he went outside to check the dumpster locks. The air was crisp, the sky finally clear, and the school was quiet except for the hum of rooftop units. But his chest still felt tight. He was heading back inside when he heard something in the dark. A sniffle. A small one. He looked around the corner and found a girl maybe 14 sitting on the concrete with her knees pulled to her chest. Her name was Lily Manning, one of the quieter students, the kind who got overlooked in crowded classrooms. She had a violin case beside her, but no ride in sight. You okay, Connor? Asked gently. She swiped her sleeve across her face. My mom's late again. I didn't want to stay inside with the band kids. They make fun of me. He crouched down, careful not to crowd her. Do you want me to walk with you to the office so you can wait somewhere warm? Lily shook her head. They'll just tell me I should have called earlier, or that I should join another club to make friends, or that I'm too sensitive. Connor nodded slowly. He knew that kind of loneliness, being surrounded by people, but unseen. "You're not too sensitive," he said. "You're just a kid having a hard night." She looked at him like she wasn't sure whether to believe it. "Your mom will be here soon," he added. "I'll stay nearby till she comes." Someone watching from the second-floor walkway might have thought it looked odd. The custodian crouched near a crying student after dark, but Connor didn't care. Kids deserved someone who showed up. Minutes later, headlights swung across the lot, and Lily's mother rushed out of the car, apologizing breathlessly. "I didn't know anyone was with her," she said to Connor. "Thank you." After they drove off, Connor exhaled a long, tired breath. When he walked back inside, Langford was waiting by the door. "What were you doing out there?" the vice principal demanded. "Helping a student who'd been left alone." Langford shook his head. "You can't be outside alone with minors at night. It's a liability nightmare. You need to think before you act." "She was crying," Connor said evenly. "Then she should have gone to the office." "That isn't your lane." Connor kept his voice steady. She needed a grown-up who wasn't going to lecture her. Langford's eyes hardened. "I'm giving you a written reprimand. One more boundary issue, and I'll have to reconsider your employment." It should have made Connor angry. Instead, it just made him tired. By midnight, he was stripping old wax from the science wing floors, the smell of chemicals rising like a fog. He worked quietly, methodically, trying to process the day, trying to let it roll off him. But 4 hours of disrespect, suspicion, whispers, and his son's trembling question. Doesn't it kept replaying in his head? Somewhere near the end of the hall, a loud pop echoed. Then another. The building went silent. Connor paused, mop in hand. A second later, the fire alarm detonated through the hallway like a scream. Not a drill, not at this hour. And not after everything he'd noticed last week, the flickering exit sign, the breaker panel that hummed too loudly, the smell of overheating circuits near the HVAC closet. Fire alarms don't lie in empty schools. Connor dropped the mop. Something big was coming. The alarm wasn't like the daytime drills. It was harsher, meaner. It echo-punched off the empty lockers like someone banging a metal spoon inside his skull. Red strobes started pulsing along the ceiling, turning the waxed floor into a river of blood-colored light. Connor didn't run at first. He jogged deliberate, controlled straight to the fire panel in the main office. Years of habit. Panic wasted seconds. Seconds cost lives. The panel was an old beige box with a plastic cover that had seen better decades. Zone lights blinked in a pattern that would have looked like nonsense to most people. To Connor, it was a map. Science wing, second floor, lab 204, active alarm, possible smoke. He lifted his head and sniffed. There it was, faint, but definite hot plastic, and something sharper underneath. Not burned food, not a false alarm. Electrical. He grabbed the wall phone, punched 911 with 2 fingers, and reported the fire in clipped, precise sentences. "This is Connor Hayes, night custodian at Ridgeview High. Active fire alarm, visible smoke. Second floor, science wing, lab 204 zone. Building is partially occupied. Repeat, partially occupied. We have an overnight youth lock-in in the gym." He could almost hear the dispatcher sit up straighter. "How many occupants?" she asked. "About 30 kids plus 2 adults in the gym. Maybe a few staff working late," he said. "I'll start evacuation." "Sir, do not re-enter this building if..." But he'd already hung up. He wasn't re-entering. He was already inside. The gym was on the far side of the school, walled off from the science wing by 2 long hallways and a set of double doors that were supposed to close automatically with the alarm. Supposed to. He sprinted down the corridor boots, gripping off the wax he'd laid himself last week. As he turned the corner, he saw with a grim twist of satisfaction that the fire doors had in fact swung shut. Good. That would buy time. What he didn't like was the second smell creeping into the air, now smoke faint but spreading. He had to move fast. By the time he reached the gym, the lock-in was chaos. The lights were still on, but the kids' middle schoolers from a local church group were already crying, grabbing sleeping bags, talking over each other. One adult leader was shouting into her cell phone. The other was hammering at the exit door like the hardware itself was the enemy. "We can't get out!" she yelled when she saw Connor. "The door won't open." Connor twisted the bar. It gave way easily. "You're pushing on the hinge side," he said more gently than he felt. "Pull." The door flew open and a blast of cold night air slapped into the overheated gym. Everybody outside, he called, voice filling the space like another alarm. "Leave your stuff. You take nothing but your shoes and your friends. Move, move, move." They listened. Maybe it was the uniform shirt. Maybe it was the certainty in his tone. Maybe it was the way he didn't sound like a teacher asking. He sounded like someone who'd given orders before that mattered. Within seconds, kids were streaming into the parking lot, blankets trailing behind them, faces wide-eyed and pale. The adults hovered near the door. "Is there really a fire?" the woman with the phone asked, breathless. "Or is it just a malfunction?" "We don't see anything." "There's smoke in the science wing," Connor said. "You stay here and keep them together. When the fire department shows up, you give them a count. Don't let anyone go back in. Got it?" She nodded, trembling. "Where are you going?" the other adult asked. "Upstairs," he said, already turning. "Sir, they said to wait." He didn't answer. The stairwell to the science wing was already hazy. Smoke gathered at the top like a heavy, dirty cloud. The alarm screamed in his ears, but he barely heard it anymore. On the third step, his leg twinged old injury, old memory. A mountainside in Afghanistan. Wind whipping past. The smell of JP-8 and burning metal. A friend with blonde hair and a gut wound, eyes going glassy, while chopper blades beat the air above them. He'd promised himself something that day. "If I get another chance, I don't freeze. I don't wait. I move." He pulled his shirt collar over his nose and leaned low into the climb. At the top of the stairs, the smoke thickened. Emergency lights glowed a sickly red along the baseboards. The exit sign at the far end of the hall flickered. Halfway down the corridor, a classroom door banged open. A young teacher, Ms. Park, he recognized her from staff emails, stumbled out coughing hard, one hand gripping the frame. "Hey," she gasped when she saw him. "The alarm, my kids." She doubled over in a fit of coughing. "How many?" he asked. "4, she wheezed. We were in the robotics room, couldn't get my key to work." Connor stepped past her into the doorway. The air inside was choking. The robotics room shared a wall with Lab 204. If something had overheated, the smoke would move fast. He could see 4 kids huddled near the back faces, buried in their sleeves. One of them, small, freckles glasses, was crying without sound. "Eyes on me." Connor called, low and steady. "We're walking out together, hands on the shoulder of the person in front of you. Stay low." They obeyed like they were used to following instructions from coaches, not realizing this man had once shouted orders with mortar rounds landing too close. He pulled his keyring from his belt as he moved muscle memory, selecting the master key without looking. He'd walked this hall 1,000 times. He knew where the floor dipped, where the lockers stuck, where the ventilation was weakest. Halfway back to the stairwell, something exploded behind the lab wall. It was more pop than boom, probably a light fixture or a small container of something, but the drywall jumped and a puff of thicker smoke surged into the hall. One of the kids screamed. "Keep moving," Connor said. "Almost there?" Ms. Park stumbled along beside them, leaning on the wall, coughing into the crook of her arm. At the stairwell door, he stopped long enough to feel the metal with the back of his hand. Warm, not hot. He cracked it open. The stairwell below was clearer, smoke rising up, leaving the lower half more breathable. Good. He ushered them in, leading the way down, still keeping them low. On the last landing, a small voice broke in the semi-dark. I can't breathe." It was the freckled kid. He'd dropped to his knees, one hand clutching his chest. His breaths came in short, panicked bursts. "Do you have asthma?" Connor asked. The kid nodded, eyes wild. "Where's your inhaler locker?" "Downstairs." Of course. Connor's brain did three things at once, remembered a training lecture on smoke inhalation, pictured the layout of the first-floor hallway, and heard the echo of another young voice in his head. "Even your dad." Not tonight, he thought. No more kids left gasping alone because adults were too slow or too proud or too scared. He knelt, turned the boy gently so he was sitting, leaned him slightly forward. "Put your hands on your knees," Connor said. "Head up a little. I want you to breathe with me, okay? In through your nose, out through your mouth. Short in, longer out. Like blowing through a straw." The boy tried. His breaths were shallow, but they started to lengthen. "This is temporary, Connor," said his voice, a calm anchor in the swirling noise. "We're going to get you outside. Stay with me." He looked up at Ms. Park. "Can you walk the other three down, straight out the north door? There's air there. Fire trucks will be here any second." Her eyes were wide with fear. "What about you?" "I'll bring him," Connor said. "One more minute." She hesitated, then nodded and shepherded the other kids down the last flight. Their sneakers slapped the concrete like a countdown. When their footsteps faded, Connor scooped the boy up in his arms, tucking him so his face rested in the crook of Connor's neck, away from the worst of the smoke. The kid grabbed his shirt in a death grip. Am I gonna die?" he whispered. "Nope," Connor said, heading down. "Not on my shift." They burst out the north door into cold, clean air and screaming sirens. The parking lot had transformed. Red and blue lights painted the brick walls. Fire engines lined the curb crews already hauling hoses. Kids from the gym huddled in blankets near the far fence, while adults tried to count heads and keep them from wandering. Ms. Park stood bent over, hands on her knees, sucking in huge lungfuls of air. As Connor carried the boy past the first engine, a firefighter in full gear turned. "Victim," he called. "Smoke exposure, possible asthma," Connor shouted back. Conscious breathing, tight chest. "Needs meds." A paramedic jogged over with a bag, slapped an oxygen mask over the boy's face, and gently took him from Connor's arms. "Nice job getting him out," he said. Connor just nodded, chest heaving, now that his own adrenaline had space to stomp around. He could have stopped there. Should have stopped there by district policy. Instead, as he watched a column of darker smoke pulse under the roofline near the science wing, he saw something that made his stomach drop. Silhouettes in a second-floor window. Two of them. Small. One hand pounded the glass. The gym kids were all outside. The robotics kids had just come down. So who was still up there? "Hey, Ms. Park," shrieked behind him. "There's still, I see them," Connor said. A firefighter captain was already barking orders, assessing entry points, deciding where to send his crew first. "We've got confirmed occupants, second floor, northeast corner," someone yelled. "Hold until we've got water supply," the captain ordered, eyeing the nearest hydrant where another crew was fighting with a stubborn connection. Nobody goes in until Connor was moving before he finished the sentence. He stepped in front of the captain, eyes locked on the window. "That's the tutoring room," he said. "2 kids, maybe 3. Door sticks in humidity and the hallway air vents pull smoke right to it. You'll lose them if you go in blind." The captain gave him a once-over, taking in the work shirt, the name, patch, the sweat still glistening on his forehead. "Sir, step back. We've got it." "You don't know this building," Connor said, and something in his tone cut through the noise. "I do. Sir, basement mechanical room runs under that wing," Connor insisted. "There's a service stair that comes up behind the storage closet next to that room. It won't be as hot yet. Less smoke. You hit that, you've got a shot at getting to them before the main corridor flashes." The captain hesitated for a split second, calculations running behind his eyes. He turned to his lieutenant. "Is that right?" he barked. The lieutenant glanced at Connor. "You sure?" Connor nodded. "I've been walking this place for 5 years. I know where all the ghosts are." The captain swore under his breath. "Fine. You're not going in, but you're riding with Bravo team to direct them. I can... You're... riding," the captain repeated, already waving over a crew. "Mask him up!" A firefighter shoved a spare mask and hood into Connor's hands. Years of muscle memory kicked in. He snapped straps into place like he'd never stopped. The smell of rubber and his own hot breath flooded his senses, mingling with the old scent of aviation fuel in his mind. He followed Bravo team to the basement entrance he'd mopped 100 times, ducking under low pipes pointing to the narrow concrete stairs tucked behind a boiler. "Up there," he said, voice muffled behind the mask. "Door opens into the storage closet. Tutoring room is 10 feet to the left." As they climbed, the heat intensified. Smoke seeped under the door above them, curling like fingers. The lead firefighter felt the metal. "Hot," he said. "We crack, we go low, we commit. On my count. 3, 2... For a heartbeat, Connor was back on the mountainside rotor wash, whipping dust into his eyes, the medic bag weighing on his shoulders like a sin. Enoch's voice ghosted through the years. "You made a choice." He did it again now. One, the firefighter finished shoving the door open. Heat punched them in the face. The storage closet was a murky box of shadows and swirling gray. Connor stayed behind the firefighters, following their movements, pointing left when they burst into the hall. At the tutoring room, the door was half shut, smoke coiling out at the top. A small hand appeared in the gap near the bottom, then disappeared. The lead firefighter shouldered the door. It didn't budge. "Blocked," he called. "Brace me!" Connor saw it instantly. A fallen metal bookshelf tipped just enough inside to jam the door and trap whoever was behind it. "Bottom's free," Connor said, dropping to his knees. "Help me slide it." He jammed his gloved hands under the edge of the door, lifting with every ounce of strength left in his legs. The firefighter beside him did the same. The door scraped upward just enough for someone small to squeeze under. "Kids," Connor shouted through his mask. "You see the gap? I need you to crawl toward my voice right now. On your stomachs. Don't stop." For a second, there was nothing. Then a face appeared, the pale, terrified face of a 7th grader Connor recognized from the cafeteria cheeks, streaked with soot. Behind her, another kid clung to her ankle, eyes squeezed shut. "You're doing great," Connor said. "Keep coming. You're almost out." They slid under the door like they were being born again. As soon as the second kid cleared the jam, Connor dropped the door. The bookshelf thudded back into place, sealing the worst of the smoke behind it. "Go," the lead firefighter barked. "Back the way we came." Connor scooped up the smaller of the 2 kids, cradling him against his chest as they duck-walked through the haze, firefighters forming a shield around them with their bodies and gear. The girl clung to the coat of the firefighter in front of her, coughing but moving. Down the service stairs, past the boiler, out into cool, blessed air. The moment they crossed the threshold, the parking lot erupted. Teachers who'd arrived in a rush clapped hands over their mouths. Parents pulled kids into desperate embraces. Ms. Park cried openly when she saw the tutoring kids stumble out alive. Near the fire engine, Vice Principal Langford stood frozen tie askew, eyes wide behind his glasses. He watched as the two kids were handed to paramedics' oxygen masks pressed over their faces, blankets wrapped around their shoulders. He watched as the fire captain clapped a gloved hand on Connor's back, not like he was a custodian, but like he was one of them. "Whoever you are," the captain said loud enough for half the parking lot to hear, "we'd be pulling bodies out if you hadn't moved when you did." You understand that Connor pulled off his mask, sweat pouring down his neck hair, flattened eyes red from the smoke. He looked smaller without the gear, and somehow larger at the same time. He glanced at the kids alive, breathing, crying now because the danger had finally passed. "Just doing my job," he said. A couple of the teenagers from the lock-in were filming with their phones, shaky hands trying to capture the scene. Somewhere in the crowd, Mason's soccer coach had arrived to help, staring hard at the man he'd called custodial staff that afternoon. The power dynamic shifted, and everyone felt it. The man they'd treated like background noise had just walked through fire for their kids. And the night at Ridgeview High would never see him the same way again. Firefighters continued dragging hoses across the asphalt, shouting to each other through masks and steam as the last of the flames hissed behind brick walls. Ambulance lights spun over the parking lot, painting every face red, blue, red again. The night was cold, sharp, and wide awake, and in the middle of it all, Connor stood hunched beside the rear bumper of Engine 14 mask, dangling from one hand, sweat and soot streaking his face like war paint. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. People were staring anyway, trying to make sense of what they'd just seen. Ms. Park kept a trembling hand pressed to her mouth, eyes never leaving him. The gym chaperones whispered his name, unsure they had it right. The group of middle schoolers he'd evacuated watched him with the stunned reverence usually reserved for someone stepping off a movie screen. Even parents who had arrived late, breathless, hair undone, panic, still clinging to their clothes, found themselves slowing as they passed, as if gravity pulled them toward the man who had walked into smoke for strangers. And then there was Langford. Vice Principal Langford stood beside a police cruiser, fingers knotted in front of him, looking like someone who'd been spun around too fast and suddenly couldn't point to true north. He didn't approach, not at first, but his eyes followed Connor with a mixture of confusion and something closer to dread. Because Langford had just watched a man he'd lectured about designated areas pull two coughing teenagers from a building that would have swallowed them alive. The firefighters wrapped up quickly. The captain returned from conferring with his lieutenant, peeled off his gloves, and approached Connor with the posture of someone who knew he was speaking to an equal. "You saved half our response time," he said. "Those kids wouldn't have lasted 5 more minutes." Connor just nodded, staring at the cracked asphalt near his boots. "You also shouldn't have been in there," the captain added. "But thank God you were." A couple parents clapped when they overheard. Others murmured agreement. It spread fast like a wave building momentum in a stadium. But the moment that shifted the whole night didn't come from applause. It came from a voice behind him. Dad Connor turned sharply. Mason was sprinting across the lot, jacket, half-zipped hair, a mess, still wearing pajama pants. And behind him, breathless and visibly shaken, was Connor's ex-wife, Hannah. The fire chief stepped aside as Mason barreled straight into his father's legs and latched on. "I saw the lights. We saw the fire. Mom said we should find you. I thought you were inside, Dad." I thought. Connor sank to one knee, pulling his son tight, one hand cupping the back of the boy's head. "I'm okay," he murmured into Mason's hair. "I'm right here. See, I'm okay." But Mason didn't loosen his grip. His small body shook with leftover panic. He looked up, eyes wet and frantic. "Were you in there?" "Yeah," Connor said softly. "I was." "Why?" Mason's voice cracked like glass. "Why did you go?" And that question asked by an 8-year-old in a smoky parking lot landed harder than any falling beam ever could. Before he could answer, a shadow fell across them. It was Langford. Connor felt Mason tense, and for a moment he thought the vice principal might launch into another lecture about protocol. But Langford's face had undergone something strange. Not fear, not anger. Guilt. Deep, hollow guilt. "Mr. Hayes," Langford said quietly. "Do you have a moment?" Hannah stepped forward, almost protective. "Can't this wait?" Langford swallowed. "It's important." Connor straightened slowly, keeping a hand on Mason's shoulder. "What is it?" Langford took a breath. "Earlier today I spoke to you in a way that was unprofessional, dismissive." He paused, mouth tight, voice strained. "I've spoken to you like that more than once." The honesty was so blunt, so out of character, the nearby teachers stiffened. "I didn't understand who I was talking to," Langford continued. "And that's my failure, not yours." Connor didn't speak. His silence, for once, worked in his favor. Langford exhaled shakily. "The fire captain told us. You directed their entry route. You knew about a secondary stairwell, none of the building plans mentioned." "I know this place," Connor said simply. "That's an understatement," Langford replied. He hesitated again, then added, "The captain also told me you carried a child out on your back, took him straight to medics, then went back in. He said the way you guided their team. It was almost like..." He trailed off, unsure how to finish. Unsure whether he had the right to ask. Connor's jaw tightened. It was almost like Langford tried again. "You'd done something like that before." Connor didn't answer him. Instead, his fingers brushed the patch on his sleeve, not Ridgeview's logo, but the old frayed Velcro square from where an Air Force insignia used to sit long ago. The habit was unconscious, almost tender. Hannah noticed first. Her breath caught. "You never told me." A paramedic stepped toward them, gesturing. "Mr. Hayes." The man held a clipboard. On it, clipped under a flashlight beam, was a form with Connor's name on it, not filled out by him, but generated based on the medic's report. It listed what he'd done tonight. Evacuation lead, smoke exposure, rescue assist, high-risk entry support. The paramedic cleared his throat. "We, noticed something when we took your vitals and asked about the scar on your leg." Hannah stared at Connor's left thigh, at the slight limp she'd noticed for years, but never understood. "Sir," the medic continued, "from the nature of that injury, and from how you moved inside, you've had tactical medical training. More than basic EMT. More than most firefighters get." His voice dropped. "You've been in real operations before." The parking lot fell quiet again. Not because the medic said something outrageous, but because it suddenly made sense. The way Connor had commanded the gym evacuation, the calm he showed when smoke filled the hall, the precision he used when carrying the boy down the stairs. The night custodian, the man the district treated like an afterthought, had moved like someone who'd once carried far heavier responsibilities. The captain walked up beside the medic, catching the tail end of the exchange. "You Air Force?" he asked casually. "Rescue or combat medic?" Connor didn't answer at first. His eyes drifted toward the students still huddled near the ambulance. The two he'd pulled out of the tutoring room were sobbing into blankets. Their parents clung to them like life rafts. Then he looked at Mason, at the fear still lingering in his son's expression. He straightened. "I served," he said quietly. "A long time ago." The captain gave a small, knowing nod. "Figured. but Langford reacted like someone slapped him. He blinked rapidly. You were military. Connor nodded once. But you never put that on your application. You just wrote, maintenance experience. It wasn't relevant to the job, Connor said. Not relevant. Langford almost choked. Tonight what you did, you saved students. You directed first responders. Sir Connor interrupted in a level voice. I mop floors. That's what you hired me for. The simplicity of that statement, the quiet, unembellished truth of it slammed into the crowd like a second shockwave, because every person standing in that parking lot suddenly realized he could have been anything. He could have held any title, but he chose this life for reasons none of them had bothered to understand. Ms. Park stepped forward, voice trembling. Why didn't you tell anyone about all of it? Connor looked down at his soot-stained hands. Because people hear military, and they assume you want attention, or pity, or special treatment. I didn't want any of that. He paused. And because I didn't want my son growing up thinking I was a hero for what I used to be, I wanted him to know me for who I am now. Mason squeezed his father's fingers. But you are a hero, he whispered. Connor's expression broke not with pride, but with something soft and fragile, like relief that hurt on the way out. The fire captain cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, I don't know what brought you to this job, but I know what we saw tonight. We're short on trained emergency safety coordinators for the district, and the chief will want to talk to you. Langford's head jerked up. Excuse me, what? The captain hardly looked at him. We need someone with his instincts, he said. Someone who knows these buildings better than the architects who designed them. Someone who'll run toward danger when everyone else runs out. Several staff members nodded instinctively. Even parents murmured agreement. Langford opened his mouth, but nothing came out. It was the closest thing to a role reversal the school had ever seen. A custodian, the man he scolded about designated areas, was being evaluated for a role with more authority, more responsibility, and more respect than Langford himself held over building safety. The captain took out a card and pressed it into Connor's hand. Think about it, he said softly. The district needs people like you, people who don't just know the job, but live it. Connor looked at the card only briefly. Then he looked at Mason. Then at the smoking school behind them. Then at the faces, teachers, parents, students, who now watched him with something that looked like awe. A decision loomed there in the cold air, unspoken but heavy. Not just about a job. About stepping back into a world he once walked away from, the world of responsibility training, leadership, risk, and the burden of other people's lives resting on his shoulders. Tonight had forced that door open. Part 5 would decide whether he walked through it. And as the last of the flames died behind brick walls and dawn crept across the horizon, one thing was clear. Ridgeview would never look at Connor Hayes the same way again. By sunrise, the fire was out. The students were safe, and the last police cruiser rolled off the lot. The morning smelled of wet ash and cold pavement, but something else lingered too, a quiet shift in the way people stood when Connor walked by. Teachers who had barely nodded at him before now stepped aside respectfully, murmuring thanks. Parents approached him with trembling voices, some unable to finish sentences without tearing up. Even the firefighters shook his hand. Not like he was a bystander, but like he was part of their own. Langford, pale and wrung out, returned with a clipboard tucked under his arm. For once, it wasn't a reprimand form. Instead, he held it like an offering. I'll be filing a full apology with the district, he said quietly. You deserve that much, and if you accept the captain's offer, I'll be the first to support it. His voice cracked on the last word. Nobody sneered at him for it. Some lessons come slow, but they stick when they arrive. Connor nodded, accepting the moment without rubbing it in. He wasn't built for revenge. He was built for doing the work in front of him. Hannah stayed nearby with Mason, watching him with a softness he hadn't seen from her in years. When the parking lot finally thinned, she stepped closer and touched his arm. "You scared us," she whispered. "I scared myself," he admitted. "You going to take that job?" He looked at his son first. Mason's face was still blotchy from tears, but there was pride in those young eyes, the kind that sinks deep and stays. "I think I might," Connor said. That night, after a long shower and a longer nap, he called the fire captain. The district's safety coordinator role was his if he wanted it. Full benefits, a real salary, a team under him, and not a single person who'd treat him like background noise. He accepted. And the first thing he did in that new position was simple. He walked the school board through every safety issue he'd reported over the years and quietly been ignored on. This time, they listened. Funding was approved before the meeting ended. 3 weeks later, Ridgeview High looked different. Emergency maps went up beside every classroom door. Students practiced real evacuation drills with timing that mattered. Teachers learned CPR and handled AED units until they could use them in the dark. Maintenance teams got new radios, new training, and new respect. And people kept thanking him in the hallways outside the grocery store at traffic lights. He never got used to it, but he learned how to nod without shrinking. One afternoon, as fall settled into winter, Connor stood beside the gym entrance supervising a drill when Langford approached again. This time there was no clipboard, just a man holding something he'd found in the cleanup of the old science wing. It was a melted, soot-covered robotics trophy. One of the kids Connor had saved must have won it before the fire. Langford held it out carefully. "They wanted you to have this," he said. "Said it's because you saved more than their room. You saved their future." Connor didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and set the trophy gently on the table beside him. Weeks rolled into months. Winter snow softened the campus spring, brought new paint to old walls, and slowly the fear of that night faded, replaced by the confidence that came when people realized they weren't helpless after all. By the end of the school year, the district hired Connor to oversee safety for every building in the county. Not because he'd run into a burning wing, though everyone remembered that, but because he made people better prepared long after the news trucks were gone. He never bragged, never gave long speeches, never talked about the past. He just showed up every day with purpose, a radio clipped to his belt, and Mason's drawing tucked in his planner, a little stick figure holding a flashlight standing between a school and a storm. One warm June evening, father and son sat together in the bleachers that had been rebuilt since the homecoming chaos. Fresh steel beams, stronger rails, safer exits. All because one man refused to stay invisible. "Dad," Mason said, leaning against him. "Yeah, bud? You happy now?" Connor looked over the field, the sun stretching long shadows across fresh-cut grass, kids running in the distance, under a sky that didn't look dangerous anymore. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I finally am." For the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. Not gone. The past never disappears, but manageable. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't patching broken things in silence. He had a place, a purpose, a community that saw him clearly. And as the wind carried the hum of summer across the field, the truth settled deep inside him. Sometimes the loudest heroes are the ones who show up every day without applause. But every so often, a single night, a single choice, lets the world finally see what was there all along.